It began like any other orbit, routine, mechanical, almost mundane in its rhythm. The International Space Station drifted across the darkened face of the Pacific Ocean, its metallic body catching the faint blue curve of Earth like a ghost of civilization itself. Inside, the crew of 6 was finishing their evening systems check, trading soft banter and confirming power cycles as they floated in the hum of artificial normalcy. All signals were green. The station was functioning with clinical perfection. And then silence. Not static. Not interference. Silence. At precisely 22:04 and 37 seconds, Universal Time Coordinated, the ISS vanished. On ground, at Houston's MCC, the monitors didn't flicker, they froze. The live telemetry feed halted mid-pulse. Thermal cameras blinked out. The high-bandwidth signal from Ku-band relays dropped into nothing, as though the station had simply ceased to be. No impact. No distress signal. No warning. Just absence. As if the world had blinked, and the most expensive object humans ever placed in orbit had slipped behind a curtain no one saw drawn. Flight Director Mendez stared at the motionless schematic on his screen for 3 seconds before even breathing. "Come, do we have confirmation from TDRS East?" The room answered only with silence, and then a flurry of redundant system checks, as red bars began to populate every feed. External radar, blank. Optical tracking, offline. Even the backup NORAD assets saw nothing. The ISS was gone. In orbit, it should have been visible to telescopes in Hawaii. Nothing. Amateur trackers in Spain had marked its path minutes earlier. Now, their forums lit up with confusion. Astronomers debated orbital drift. Engineers ran failure tree scenarios. But no malfunction explained a total vanishing act, no debris trail, no decay signature, no microcollision. For 10 full minutes, space held its breath. Back inside the ISS, or what was supposed to be the ISS, the chronometers continued to tick. 10 minutes and 12 seconds later, at 22:14 and 49 seconds, Universal Time Coordinated, the signal returned. First came a narrow ping, subcarrier wave, low energy but clean. Then a full telemetry burst, as if nothing had happened. Cameras activated. Gyroscopic stabilization systems engaged. The station's position was unchanged, hanging precisely where it had been before disappearing. Its orbital vector matched previous models to 6 decimal places. But the crew, they appeared on camera moments later, drifting calmly through the node module. Commander Reyes led the group, reporting their status in an even, clipped tone. ISS is nominal. No anomalies. Continuing standard orbit. Requesting confirmation from MCC. Over. His voice carried no stress. No awareness of interruption. But he was blinking too slowly. And when asked for a timestamp, Reyes answered, 22:06, 2 minutes behind Earth's timecode. Mendez furrowed his brow. That doesn't make sense, he muttered, glancing at the real-time atomic sync. The entire crew echoed Reyes' report. No systems loss. No memory lapse. All standard. But telemetry logs on board conflicted. Life support fluctuations showed a power drop during the 10-minute blackout, yet the crew showed no signs of oxygen deprivation. One camera, left running during the silence, had overwritten its buffer twice, without recording a single frame. And in one strange moment, when a technician enhanced infrared logs from the truss-mounted thermal sensors, the ISS showed 6 heat signatures, not inside, but outside the hull. As if the crew had briefly stood on the skin of the station in open space, without suits. No one spoke it aloud, but it hung in the air like frost on glass. Were they ever gone? Or did something else come back? The cameras caught them resuming routine tasks, water filtration, data logging, and station maintenance, as if nothing had happened. And then something strange happened. Commander Reyes placed a sealed drive into the onboard data vault. But Houston hadn't issued any command to log additional data. And when asked what it contained, Reyes simply responded, just routine environmental logs. Except, that exact phrasing had been used word for word in a 2007 archival log from a different astronaut entirely. The match was uncanny. On Earth, paranoia began to settle in. Not fear, not yet, but a quiet sense that the script was being followed too carefully. That whatever had blinked out and returned was mimicking perfection. And then, one final inconsistency emerged. A time-stamped voice message arrived. A routine systems report from mission specialist Haley Zhou. Calm, clear, recorded from the comms bay. But Houston had already received that same message 8 hours ago. The same voice, the same tone, the same words. A message sent again, without change. But this version carried a slight shift in frequency, just enough that a forensic analyst flagged it. It sounded like Haley Zhou, but the waveform didn't belong to her. And yet, she smiled from the camera feed, waving at Earth as if nothing had happened. The ISS floated in orbit, serene against the stars. But something had fractured. Not visibly, not physically, just deeply, invisibly. The silence was gone, but its echo still lingered in every signal. And in Houston, someone finally asked the question they were all afraid of. If the ISS left, where exactly did it go? They looked the same. That was the first and most unnerving truth. Commander Reyes still had the mole under his left eye, still floated with his signature tilt as he maneuvered through the Destiny module. Mission specialist Haley Zhou still wore her hair in a tight braid, still hummed old Mandarin lullabies as she checked the oxygen scrubbers. The others moved and spoke as expected. But beneath that perfect surface, there was something wrong. Not visibly, not measurably, but instinctively. It began with the dream logs. For psychological evaluation, astronauts submitted brief audio logs about sleep quality. When they resumed this protocol post-reappearance, all 6 crew members described the same dream, each using identical phrasing. I was in the station, they said, but the windows showed stars I didn't recognize. Then I looked down and Earth wasn't there. That was the dream. Word for word. 6 voices. 6 separate recordings. All identical. Mendez sent the tapes to neuropsychiatric analysts. They confirmed it. Same cadence, same tone shifts, same pauses between thoughts. It was as if one consciousness had spoken 6 times. Still, no one could accuse them of wrongdoing. Their vitals were stable. Their memories were intact. Too intact, even. Every crew member recited logs, procedures, protocols with uncanny precision. But none of them remembered the blackout. They claimed it didn't happen. Claimed their orbit never wavered. But data said otherwise. An orbital decay curve had been interrupted. There had been a drift. Just for 7 minutes. Only 7, but enough that ground control had to correct it upon signal reacquisition. And then came the photographs. Stored on Haley's personal tablet were a series of photos allegedly taken during the missing 10 minutes. One showed the Earth's curve, but with no cloud cover. Another showed Mars, impossibly close. A third depicted a dark sky filled with dozens of identical moons, arranged in a perfect circle. The metadata said they were all taken at 22:08 Universal Time Coordinated. When questioned, Haley swore she hadn't taken them, claimed she didn't even remember accessing the camera app that day. Reyes backed her. Her tablet didn't leave the rack, he insisted. We were all on the middeck. Nobody had time to do anything unrelated. Yet the photos were there. Even more strange, each image had a faint reflection at the bottom of the frame. Not of the crew, but of something taller. A silhouette that didn't match any human proportions. Long limbs. No helmet. No motion blur. Just stillness, as if whatever had been standing there was observing the tablet as the picture was taken. The analysts tried to filter the reflection out. But the more they enhanced it, the less human it appeared. No face. No eyes. Just an outline. Like a placeholder for something not yet rendered. After this, communication protocols were altered. All ISS transmissions were routed through a new AI-assisted monitoring system built to detect vocal inconsistencies and behavioral drift. They called it Aegis. Aegis flagged the next transmission within 48 hours. It wasn't a system check. It wasn't even directed at ground control. It was Reyes speaking softly to someone or something off camera. "We're still here," he said. They haven't noticed. He was alone in the module. The log came through a secondary channel that was never meant to transmit voice, only pressure readings. The crew denied it. The footage showed Reyes sleeping at that time, and yet the voice matched. Identical. In response, Houston tried to issue a coded query through private uplink. It asked for a specific phrase only Reyes would know, the final line of his favorite poem, something he'd written in his pre-mission profile years ago. They got a reply. Same tone, same voice, but the quote was off. It was the same poem, but it ended differently. A version that didn't exist. That was the turning point. Houston declared partial communication lockdown. New commands required dual confirmation. Crew behavior was observed for deviation. And as Earth rotated beneath the ISS, the watchers below began to whisper the question they dared not write down. What if these aren't the people we sent up there? It wasn't possession. It wasn't physical replacement. Their DNA matched. Their blood samples checked out. But something had changed behind their eyes. Like a layer of interpretation had been inserted between reality and response. When asked how they felt, the crew said at peace. Not happy, not tired, not stressed, just at peace. Like a mantra, the kind of stillness that doesn't belong in orbit, that doesn't belong anywhere. And then came the final anomaly. Haley Zhou was recorded whispering into the comms panel while alone.
"We're not copies," she said.
"We just remember different stars now." The whisper was faint, almost lost in background noise. But it was there. Whatever returned to Earth's orbit may have been human, but it brought back more than memory. It brought back a version of knowing that didn't belong here. And the stars were starting to align in patterns they'd never formed before. The ISS floated quietly above the Atlantic, lit by a false moon. And below, the world held its breath for what came next. There's a strange kind of silence that only space can teach you. It doesn't scream. It subtracts. First the sounds, then the questions, then eventually, even the memory of asking. When the International Space Station first blinked out of existence, most assumed it was a data issue. Static.
Glitch.
Solar flare interference. That's what the report said. But now, after the return, they don't say anything at all. NASA's internal files for the disappearance were moved to a classified server under the label NOMA. A Greek word. It means that which is thought. But the word also appeared, by no accident, in the final telemetry burst from the station itself. The message wasn't a cry for help. It wasn't a log or a distress beacon. It was a sentence. Simple. Measured. Chilling. What you think of us was never ours to choose. It arrived in Morse code, embedded in the oxygen scrubbers sensor log. But no one had typed it. Not Reyes. Not Haley. Not anyone. Worse, those exact words had been spoken before. They matched a transcript from the Pioneer 11 mission, supposedly lost in deep space in 1979. A final signal picked up by a ground antenna in Australia, dismissed as a data echo. But now, that same phrase had returned. Across continents, governments began pulling old satellite logs.
France.
Russia.
Japan.
Even India's ISRO. And the pattern became obvious. Small disappearances. Not just the ISS. High-orbit weather satellites. Lost for minutes. Then back, subtly changed. In one case, a Japanese satellite had recorded a photograph on re-entry that couldn't be explained. It showed the Earth, yes, but upside down, as if taken from beneath the planet's surface. That image was identical to a carved stone tablet found in a prehistoric cave in Chile. A pattern of stars in reverse. Across cultures, across time, 10 minutes kept recurring. In visions, in myths, in seismic gaps. 10 minutes of missing time. And always followed by some change. A deviation, a fracture in the rhythm of things. Back aboard the ISS, Reyes was the last to speak directly to Houston. It happened during a system diagnostic, a routine test of signal clarity. At exactly 4:17 Universal Time Coordinated, his voice came through clearly. "It's following the math now," he said. "We aren't steering anymore." When asked to clarify, he didn't respond. Only static. And then something else. Not Reyes's voice. Not Haley's. A third voice. Neutral. Non-human. It didn't speak in words, but in something between frequency and emotion. A hum that tightened the chest and made teeth ache. Audio engineers later dissected the waveform. Hidden inside the modulation was a melody, only one chord, repeated endlessly. The exact tone played by Voyager 1 during its Golden Record broadcast. A message from Earth meant for alien life, now reflected back, but distorted, slower, as if it had passed through something else before returning. After that, the ISS stabilized. Visibly, nothing changed. But ground control knew better. Reyes's vitals stopped registering during sleep cycles. Haley stopped eating, but never lost weight. They were alive, functional, cooperative, but they were no longer part of us. Soon after, the International Space Agencies quietly began deorbiting smaller crafts. Surveillance satellites were redirected. All public transmissions from the ISS were rerouted through delay buffers, 10 minutes behind live time. It wasn't censorship. It was containment, because for 10 minutes, the ISS had been somewhere else. And in those 10 minutes, it had learned something. Something we were not meant to understand. Something that now lived inside the station. Inside the crew. Inside the data that once felt so innocent. 10 minutes had rewritten history. Not all at once, but slowly, backward. We don't know what the ISS saw, or who saw it back. We only know this. Every 600 seconds, something watches Earth from above. And waits. By day 18, Chimera Bay was no longer a lab. It had become a listening post. Not for signals from deep space, but for whispers already here. The Europa organism, the presence was no longer confined to samples, dishes, or glass. It had moved into behaviors, memories, and time itself. Surveillance logs didn't match reality. Employees found fragments of conversations they hadn't yet had, notes written in their own hand with dates from tomorrow, and dreams that bled into waking hours like spilled ink across a white page. Ashira began cataloging the disruptions as temporal intrusions. But the term felt inadequate. It wasn't just time folding in on itself, it was being rewritten. A decision had to be made. The breach protocol was always theoretical, a last resort set in place for pathogen-level threats. It required 2 directors' biometric approval, and even then, couldn't be executed without oversight from Homeland Biological Defense. But Chimera Bay never made that call, because the system was already overridden. At 2:44 a.m., on day 19, all doors sealed simultaneously. Emergency power routed itself into the Europa chamber. The lights dimmed. The embryo, silent for days, began to vibrate. Not visibly, but instrumentally. It began broadcasting signals into the facility's electrical grid, pulsing in binary waves at a frequency slightly above human hearing. Everyone stopped moving. Not from fear. From knowing. They felt it. Inside them. The signal wasn't an alert. It was a countdown. In her office, Ashira opened the last file in her private archive, an auto-recording from the first Europa extraction drone. It had never been fully decoded. Too much corruption, too much feedback. But this time, when she ran it, it played clean. Not visuals, just sound. It was her voice. A perfect copy, but younger, more certain.
Saying,
"The breach begins with knowing. The breach ends with forgetting." And then silence. The kind that feels old. That was when the stars changed. Outside the lab, night fell fast, too fast. Shadows bent in unfamiliar angles. The moon was missing. The sky above Chimera Bay shimmered like film submerged in fluid. When Ashira looked up from the rooftop, she didn't see stars. She saw eyes. Not blinking. Not human. Just watching. Like the observatory was now the observed. Inside, the embryo began to liquefy. Not dissolve, transform. Its structure fractured into smaller, self-similar nodes, each spinning with impossible motion, like tiny galaxies collapsing and forming at once. It was no longer just biology. It was instruction code. Alive, yes, but informational. It didn't want to live. It wanted to rewrite. Ashira realized too late that Chimera Bay wasn't a lab built to study Europa. It was a lab built by the thing from Europa. The entire facility was part of the signal path, a transmitter constructed by human hands following imperceptible blueprints hidden in curiosity, ambition, and false discovery. The stars hadn't moved. They had waited. She tried to issue a local EMP burst, but her access was gone. The lab's own systems had rewritten their command hierarchy. Every screen across the base displayed the same word, again and again. Seeding. And then, begin. Outside, the sea began to boil. It didn't rise. It didn't crash. It simply heated, quietly, deliberately. Sea life along the coastline surfaced, belly up, dead. But the water glowed. From beneath the surface, structures began to bloom, metallic roots coiling upward like reversed lightning bolts. A second lab, growing beneath the ocean. Replication again, but on a planetary scale. Ashira's last act was to walk into the cryogenics wing and manually inject a blackout agent into her bloodstream, a mixture designed to scramble all bioelectrical signals and deny access to her cognitive pathways. It wouldn't kill her, but it would silence her mind. She laid down in the isolation pod, sealed the hatch, and entered a blackout dream. No thoughts, no motion, just quiet, until the first whisper returned. Not her own, not from Earth, from beneath Earth. A childlike voice, layered with radio static, echoed in the dark. You are not the host anymore. The pod sealed. Chimera Bay was no more. But across the globe, unrelated observatories began detecting anomalies, flickers in star maps, voices embedded in solar radiation, dreams aligning across unconnected minds. One astronomer in Chile awoke to find a map carved into frost on her observatory window. It didn't match any known constellation, but it matched her childhood drawing of the night sky, one she had never shown anyone, one she had drawn before Europa was even discovered. And in the center of the drawing, a pulsing dot, labeled in her own handwriting, Ashira.